afternoon, everybody. I'm Charles Neal, and I have the honor of serving as the president for the NAMIC Atlanta chapter. Now, for those of you who may not know, NAMIC stands for the National Association of Multi-ethnicity in Communications. And both at the national and at the regional levels, we're all about engagement and professional development. And our engagement model is simple. Get everybody in the room together, get as much diversity that you can, and hope that from there you can spawn a mentor-mentee relationship. And the icing on the cake from that relationship would be a leader taking enough interest in the person and having enough trust to have it graduate to sponsorship. Now, when we talk about our professional development, you can look at college age or their equivalent, individual contributors, managers, executives. And what we try to do at NAMIC is have touch points for each point in those career progressions. Now, this is a live event, and although we won't be taking questions, we know that chat in a lot of cases is the place to be. And so we would hope that you hit it fast and furious and give us your thoughts, your perspectives, and your views. Now, with all of that said, I have the privilege and the honor of introducing a broadcasting cable television Hall of Famer, President and CEO of Cox Communications, Pat Esser. Pat, welcome.
Charles, thank you. Thank you for the invitation. Charles, I was just thinking, it wasn't that long ago in the lunchroom, you and I had a conversation about you taking on this leadership role with NAMIC.
But yeah.
And you were like hesitant. And I was like, go for it. These opportunities just don't come along very often, but you've done an excellent job. And I know how much time you and the panel we're going to spend time with today have put into this. So it's much appreciated. Well done.
Well, my appreciation, and thanks for that pep talk that we had in the conversation in the lunchroom. Before we get hot and heavy, this conversation that's been had in different meetings, we wanted to know, it was like a running bet, side bet. Have you been keeping up with your daily exercise regimen?
Okay, for those who don't know, I'm a creature of habit. Everything I do, I try to keep to a routine. When you travel a lot, you have to. And one thing I really enjoyed past tense, was going to the gym when I was in town at CTEC, which was called, if you're not a Cox employee, it's the old gym in the building. And for the last year, we haven't been able to go to that gym. So, I've tried to keep up my morning.
I'm appreciative. I want some money. So you ready to get in there?
Let's go for it, Charles.
All right. So it's been heard around campus, that you've been known in your 40 plus year career early on to climb poles. And then you also were knocking on doors. And I think we may actually have a picture of you in your earlier years, and how you and your colleagues were. Now, I wanted to get a sense from you. How did those early roles in your career progression prepare you for becoming the president and CEO of not just the third largest, but the largest privately owned cable operator in the country?
Okay, great question. I don't know that you really ever know where life is going to take you. I always encourage people to live in the moment. Some of those roles, a great picture from Waterloo back when I had a little bit of hair. This was my first job in the cable business, but actually my first job was actually climbing poles and cutting in taps. I was in the construction side of the business, and I wasn't very good at it, and I fell a lot. And the guide right to my, as I stand, to the guy in the white jacket, his name is Don Listro, was a former Cox executive, and I was selling door to door in this picture, and all he ever did was talk about Cox and what an incredible company it was. And on a Thursday night in Waterloo, Iowa, I loaded everything I owned in the back of my Dodge Coronet, and I drove to Hampton Roads, Virginia, and knocked on the door and asked Cox to give me a shot, and they hired me as the local production guy, public access guy, community events, and that's how I got my start with Cox. Along the way, it's all about people. This business is all about people. We have a wonderful network. We have wonderful products. I'm taking nothing away from any of that, but you learn really quickly it's about the people. And then you learn about highly functioning teams and how powerful that can be. Lots of books written about it. Usually comes down to trust. You realize where the hard work is done. And you just gain an appreciation for that. You get a lot of experiences along the way, some planned, some unplanned. You have a number of mentors along the way. I suspect we'll talk a little bit about mentors today. You may even be lucky enough to stumble into a sponsor. You may be lucky enough to even sponsor somebody else. And it's been a company whose values match my values to a T. And I've just been blessed. And along the way, I've relocated a few times. But each chapter is a chapter unto itself, and we won't bore everybody on the call with it today. But it's been incredible. I will tell you this, Charles, I still get up in the morning and I am excited to go to work. That hasn't changed anything. I don't know what it is about this business. I think it goes back to my roots as a kid, growing up in a small town in Iowa. The television was our portal to the world. And when we got cable TV, and I remember the day we got it, I was a freshman in high school, it changed everything for me. Yep. Everything.
So since you brought us back in time from a memory perspective, I normally ask, what do you think your peers or what stage do you think you are within your leadership track? But I wanted to take you back to a story as well. And so probably about a year and change ago, we had a conversation about me having to have gallbladder surgery. I had to have my gallbladder removed, right? And so over the break, I got an email and it said from Pat Esser, and I'm like, oh, let me see what's going on with in the wonderful world of Cox. I'm thinking it's going to be something that's global to all of the employees. But it was a personal note from you asking me how did it go, how was I doing, etc. And I'm like, wow, okay, I didn't even know you remembered. I couldn't even fathom that you had remembered with all that you have going on. But it was a day that I got back in, and I'm probably looking miserable through the cafeteria, and it was in the morning. And I happened to see you in a meeting, and I just put my head up, kept walking, then looked up again, and we caught eyes. And you said, "Excuse me for a second," to the people you're talking with. Came over, you checked in on me, and I'm once again asking. I'm like, okay, this is a double down. So I'm feeling really good. I sit down, and I said, wait a minute, let me look to see who you were talking with, and then I see your peers and Alex Taylor. And I'm like, wait a minute, there's no way in the world, And so for most people who sit here and hear that, they're like, okay, I get it. I'm like, no, you don't necessarily get it. With all of the responsibilities that you have going on, for you to even remember, there was no EA, no executive assistant around for you to take notes, to send an email, to check in, to what looked to be an engrossed meeting, to take the time to say, excuse me for a second, to come in and check, because that was the first time we saw each other. And then the gravity of who was in that conversation. Now, if it was just isolated to me in terms of these types of experiences, it'd be one thing. But I had the ability to go to, say, a Billy and say, hey, Billy, Pat and I were in a conversation. And he said how inspirational you were. You should have saw her reaction. When we were talking earlier the other day, and Adrian was talking, and you said, hey, Adrian, hold on, before we go hot and heavy, how are you doing with his situation? These are items. These are, managers manage well. They make sure that the I's are T's, dotted across, and the business goes on. We're happy we get a check because we know it's being managed well. Leadership is a little different, right? And Vanguard awarded you with their highest honor of a leadership award. Why? Because that empathy, that ability to have a sensitivity to individuals who are working for you. Leaders inspire. You inspire. And so I'll ask you to tack on where you feel you are, what your peers may say, but there is a group of individuals who work for you who would like to be able to come back and tell you that past the day-to-day work where we get a check and we're happy, you inspired us to do more, to be more. We come out, we say we're going to join organizations. We're going to do things that go past the 9 to 5 to better our communities. That comes from inspiration from the top. And you just needed to hear that.
Thank you, Charles. Okay, let's go on to the questions.
So,
I know you got me a little off guard, Charles.
Right?
That's what we're all on a journey in life, and we're all going through life together, and we have high days and low days and struggles and whatever. And I just love people. I don't know. My wife tells me, "Do you have to know everybody's story?" Yeah, I do. Because that's where I get my inspiration. Everyone has a story. We don't all slow down enough to find it out, but that's what makes it so interesting. And every story has a story, and that's what makes, inclusion and diversity hard because you have to slow down and listen and learn and relearn. And maybe I was just worried about you, Charles. I don't know.
Oh, if it was just me, there'd be one thing. But like I said, there's countless people who have similar stories. But I'm gonna let you off the hook on that one and get me back into the conversation. So
Okay,
it's been slightly over a year since, we've had the pandemic shut down the country, right? We've had racial injustices, we've had violence, we've had economic, in some cases, people will call it disasters, all formulated through this one big bubble called 2020, right? We had presidential elections, etc. When you look at all of these items that have come in, how do you feel, or what do you think in terms of your leadership style and your leadership of capabilities that this has stressed you? Because this is not a typical, 2020 was not a typical year. Your leadership had to be tested at highest levels because you had your own internal family issues, I'm imagining, because they weren't immune from COVID or economic issues, right? You had the company that you had to think about. So from a leadership perspective, how did this stretch you?
Well, everything you just mentioned is a threat to our company and a threat to us as human beings. They have that in common. The fact they all happened, some have been happening for a while. It's just an awareness that what's been going on. And I don't know that any one of us was prepared as individuals to deal with all of it. I mean, let's be honest, folks on the call. How many of you felt an enormous amount of anxiety and probably depression last April? I mean, we should talk about it because I did. I mean, I thought we were going home remote for 2 weeks. And then 2 weeks later, I realized it's probably going to be 3 months. And then 3 months later, I probably realized it's going to be, 6 months. And if you haven't figured me out, I like being around people. So that was really hard on me. And I like my personal freedom. And that was challenged. So I think first we had to learn how to live in this new world with certain things that we weren't in control of on a lot of levels. I think probably the one, I'm going to go further down your examples there. I think the trust and accountability, and we'll probably talk a little bit about that later, and around how important that is in a company. I think that there was an awakening for myself, at least. I'll pick on myself. I found myself asking a lot more questions. I found myself asking people how they were feeling, how they were doing. I found myself saying, what is my role? What's my responsibility? And I think everyone was doing that. I don't care where you are and what you just described, from the food bank down the street to friends and family, to calling maybe possibly people in your family you give care to, checking in on them, to just finding ways to lower stress. And we're still working through it. I believe we're in a better place, at least from a health standpoint, because the vaccinations are in the market. We got a long ways to go on racial justice. And hopefully we spend a little time on that today.
We sure will. So you just mentioned vaccinations, right? And so there is a vaccination strategy and plan that's being rolled out. But as we go further down that vaccination path, if you look at what we consider BAU, business as usual, a year ago, present, future, the world has changed. You had work from anywhere to work from home. You have recruitment that's global, big picture. Intermediate picture is you could hire any person around the U.S. You have retention issues that now come into play because sometimes people can go get a job, that's not local or regional. They can now work in, Seattle, but from home. What do you see as BAU moving forward?
So we have a Cox Enterprises board meeting coming up in 2 weeks, and the new normal is one of my topics because I think we all need to talk about what we're managing our way through. By the way, let me stop here. I do encourage folks to get vaccinated. I suspect you have too. If you've had family or friends that have gotten COVID, who have had really scary experiences, I just encourage people to get vaccinated. I just got my second shot, so I'm moving along the continuum. My family is starting now through their process. They're a little younger. The new world, I think flexibility is going to meet accountability. And you used a lot of great words there, Charles, and they all are probably a call unto themselves. I think you said inclusion. I think you said access. There's balancing. Along with it, we got productivity. We want development to occur. We know some things are best done face to face. Some things can be done remotely. We're going to have more flexibility in how we think about that. I'm asking that we respect home base and we respect the nest, meaning that, so a couple of people we're going to have Tamar come on here in a moment. Tamar lives out west, Nevada, right? Tamar? Las Vegas. If I go to meet with the governor, and the governor's name there is Sisolak, and he happens to say to me, what's your economic impact on the state of Nevada? And I say, well, 500 of the employees don't live in Nevada. They actually live in Portland and Paducah and Tampa. He's going to say, do you care about the state of Nevada or do you not care about the state of Nevada? As much money as you make in the state, I would like those people employed in the state. So we have a balancing act to do to have our talent as close to the businesses as we can, but have flexibility inside of our businesses and inside of our regions so we can attract the kind of talent we have. We're not unique. Every business in America is going to have this challenge. And we're going to try some things. We're going to trial some things. Some are going to go really well. Some are probably not going to go as well. X Labs was built for a lot of reasons. X Labs at Cox is really an employee experience where we look at practices employee practices in particular that we've had historical and that we want to adapt those to better fit us going forward. We're going to use that a lot, put a little stress on that organization. It's helped us change a number of things, make us a better company today. There is more we can work on. I think being adaptable, being flexible as employees of Cox at any company is probably the tagline of the day. And just knock on wood, let's just hope numbers go our direction and that less people are getting sick and less people are getting hospitalized. And then I'll go back where I started. Our employee safety is number one to me. I do not want to endanger our employees in any way, shape, or form. So that's really important to me.
Got it. So I'm going to shift gears slightly.
Okay.
Right. We have to give you credit. You, when we look back on the boards that you've served and the impact that you've had in diverse organizations, whether it be a NAMIC or WIC, NCTA, et cetera, Cates Foundation, you've been doing this for decades. It's not like, oh, wait a minute, hey, this has just happened and Pat's jumping on this board or, having these conversations with different individuals. And so one of the questions I wanted to ask you is, NAMIC specifically, what endeared NAMIC to you or you to NAMIC?
First I saw the impact it was having on the industry, but I'll give Kathy Johnson. You probably don't even know who Kathy Johnson is. Kathy Johnson was the Shanice of a number of years ago who ran NAMIC, and there was a handful of us that she just asked, would you spend more time with me and be more of an advisor because I want to get NAMIC more embedded in the business. And I guess she just let me come in the room. And that's sometimes what it is. Sometimes it's just an invitation. And so there was a very small group of us that met with her on a regular basis, got to know her well. The mission of NAMIC, the impact of NAMIC, and you said it as we started out, you talked about engagement and development, really important to our industry, really, really important to our industry. And so things like working with her to get NAMIC to show up at NCTA and do a board presentation, just getting her in the room and giving her the credibility to meet with others like myself and talk about issues inside the industry or issues of talent, I thought was really, really important. So I'll give a shout out to Kathy Johnson because remember this, a lot of people that went before us have done a lot of hard work to give us what we have today.
So I'm going to say a name on that note. I've heard you, when we were in New York for Diversity Week and other locations, and whenever this name comes up, it has an emotional response with you. May Douglas, how did May affect your career? And, I'm just going to leave it there. May Douglas, how did she affect you?
I just talked to her last week. May and I are pretty tight. Wow. You know, May often said, May was a very senior executive at Ciba Geigy, and she left there and moved to Atlanta. And I'm telling May's story, is probably not fair. And she said it was her calling to come to Atlanta. She wasn't even sure why. And I think it was my blessing that she did, because we met each other and she became my head of human resources when I was in the ad sales business. May is a mentor to me. She's taught me a lot along the way. Maybe I even mentored her on a couple things. We just shared a lot of life lessons with each other. Trying to think of one that I can share that try not to be too personal. Well, here's an example, Charles. We had put an executive into an interim role, interim officer role. He was African American, and I was a little frustrated he wasn't taking accountability and wasn't moving fast enough. But man, I've given him the accountability, and just showing how mentoring can help you. If I've shared the story with you before, I apologize if you're hearing it again.
No, go for it.
May cornered me one-on-one and said, Pat, when he goes to church on Sunday, what do you think his experience is like versus your experience? I said, I don't know. So let me tell you what it's like. When he walks into the church and he's going down the aisle to find a place to sit with his family, moms are elbowing their kids and saying, that's da-da-da, they're an officer at Cox. I said, yeah. He said, no, I understand. He's a role model in his community now. And kids look up to him and families look up to him. So first, he doesn't want to screw it up. Understand that. And second is, you don't know the path he traveled to get where he's at today. Cut him a little slack, give him a little time, because his confidence will come with time. And she didn't say, but to me, like a fine wine, you got to let him breathe. Let him just get in the role, get comfortable, realize he does have your support. He is an outstanding executive today in our industry. He is superb. So May was right. Sometimes you just got to let the executive just have a little bit of room, and don't judge them based upon how you got where you're at.
Yeah. The amazing part of that story is that the mentorship and the sponsorship is happening at that level. A lot of times people believe that it's just the IC or the initial manager coming in, not realizing that, there are coaches for every single level of not careers, right? So we're going to sort of do a quick transition. We're going to invite some incredible leaders through our employee resource group over at Cox. And so first up, we're going to invite Tamar Hoapili. Sorry, Tamar. She is representing the Lotus ERG, which is the Asian and Pacific Islander group. Then we have Adrian Bernal, who's going to be representing Ola, which is our Latino ERG. And then we also have Terrence Hyman, who's representing our Black African American ERG. And so welcome, guys and gal. And I want to start with you, Tamar. So in the news, it's like a replay of 2020 now in 2021, where you start to see that the level of violence that's occurring is ratcheting up. And in this case, it's ratcheting up to the Asian and Pacific Islander demographic, if you want to say it that way. How from an emotional standpoint, what's going on within the Asian and Pacific Islander group, and how's the ERG aiding in their, I guess, sanity, for lack of a better term?
Well, aloha, Charles, and aloha, Pat. Thank you so much for allowing us to join the coffee talk. The Lotus Herb, we've been quite busy. We've been doing our best to be a foundation, to be a resource, a listening ear, a shoulder for any and all of our Cox, coworkers, our family. When the violence, is in your backyard, as we know, in our backyard. I'm not going to lie, it shook our employees to the core, right? It shook us to the core. And coupled with the attacks across the country, we knew we had to do something. So we created a toolkit, and we call it Hate is a Virus Toolkit. And it provided resources for reporting racism and discrimination. if you see it happening, you have to report it. You have to say something, right? The toolkit provides resources for your self-care. Many of our employees shared that they were scared for themselves, scared for their family members, for their friends, stress and fear. So we wanted to ensure that they took care of themselves. And then, of course, we shared the resources that Cox offers. Our company has a wide range of programs, in our health and wellness division. And it's amazing that everything that the company has provided for us. So we wanted to ensure that the employees had access and knowledge of those resources, but the number one thing is we encouraged all of our employees, whether they were API or allies, check in on each other, right? Make sure we're okay. Working from home can be difficult. And this type of violence out there, it's, it can be stressful for some, The one thing that we just did recently was we held an open forum listening session, and it was part of the National Stop Asian Hate Day of Action and Healing. And it created a safe space for employees to just kind of discuss how they were feeling and how we can help each other. And it was, it helped our hearts. And, I've been with Cox for 21 years, and it's just amazing to see the family, the togetherness, the support that the company gives each other, at all times, but especially in these times, that are quite challenging.
I appreciate that. And Pat, I would love for you to weigh in on that, but part of your response, when we were talking previously, I had said racial injustice and some other, you said, no, Charles, change that conversation to violence. And you were adamant about that. Would you want to go in any deeper on why?
Well, you're trying to get the white male in the conversation here too. So, we had an honest conversation about this, is that the first thing you do is, do you agree violence is occurring as a white male? Yes. Okay, now we can have a conversation about why that violence is occurring, because this is where you have a responsibility. So part of it is just finding that common language to get people to talk to each other. Tamara, I'll tell you that I don't know if you understand the impact that I'm going to call listening sessions. This is probably but I'm giving it from my perspective, because I know a number of people who have been in the session and they've walked away saying, I didn't understand. I didn't have the perspective. And that's what this has all been about. Last year, Black Lives Matter, a number of the protests going on. We did a number of listening sessions because people, I didn't understand. I needed perspective. That gave me perspective. And in many cases, I wouldn't have gotten it without that. So I just applaud folks who worked on the sessions throughout last year. We still have a lot of training going on from last year. The sessions that you all are leading right now in Lotus has a huge impact on our company. And these are complex. It's not easy to understand. And I'll even shout out to a few employees last year and more recently who were willing to do one-on-one conversations with me, because that's where you can ask hard questions. And so anyway, I'll not derail you anymore. Sorry.
Tamara, any other questions you wanted to ask in there?
Pat, I kind of wanted to kind of dive into the business practices, knowing or realizing that the violence that is taking place around the country. How do you believe that our business practices, or maybe business practice in general, will be changed given the recent event?
Well, back to safety.
Right.
We have to worry about our people. We got people going in customers' homes. We got customers walking into our retail store. You're out doing events. I mean, I know we're putting our people out on the front line, so I worry about our employees' safety. So we spend a fair amount of time talking about that. The second thing is our employees need to know we have their back. You just need to know. You can't walk around everywhere you go and worry about whether the place you hopefully love and come to work doesn't understand you. So we need to make sure that our employees know we got their back. And what example can I use? If you're in a customer's home or a customer comes into a retail store and they don't understand our zero tolerance for bigots and the way you treat people, and they need to know that you don't have to tolerate that. That's just not acceptable. And we have an escalation process. We encourage, we train, and managers and leaders are there to help. But that, I think, I'm just trying to lower the stress level so people can just do their job and be respected, be productive. And we will serve customers, and we do a great job of serving customers, but there's a respectful way to do that. One of the things I don't know that we're unique about this. This came out of June of last year, I believe. We formed an Action Speaks committee, which is 30 leaders across Cox, to look at issues that are in front of us. And actually, they identified 8 different areas to try to help improve us as a company. And so I'm going to talk about, I will not remember all 8. So let me just mention a couple, because you're going to say, give me a couple of examples. One is we were looking at representation of people of color across the company at certain levels, at higher senior levels. And we just said, if you don't take a hard look at yourself and start asking questions and don't start trying to improve, that things aren't going to change. And we want to change. So one of the inspiring pieces of work going on now is for certain level jobs and above, we are now, that slate, the slate of candidates must be a diverse slate. A person of color and a woman must be on the slate, and it can't be just the same person. It can be, but then we want a second candidate in the pool as well. Okay, so we want a slate of candidates that represents our markets and our communities. The second thing is the panel that's doing the interview. The same thing. We want a diverse panel doing the interviewing so that we have diversity in the candidates, diversity in the panel. The third one, which is more probably controversial in America, is we track representation now. And what's happening is we're not seeing representation get to the senior levels, the level we want it to be at. So over a period of time, we now have very specific metrics and goals. People's comps are based on it. We want to move that needle over time. We have a lot of talent in our company that we're not considering, that need to be in the consideration set, and the opportunity needs to be given. And this will remind leaders about that responsibility. All that, by the way, I just gave 3 examples of stuff that came right out of the Action Speaks committee. Where our money goes in our communities, some of the causes that we're supporting. Action Speaks has a big role on that, and I'll even go to the listening sessions and ERGs, which I'm not sure if this screen is up or not, but the Cox ERGs, the 3 that are listed in front of us, and there's more ERGs than these 3, but is an outgrowth of us trying to get the employee voice more heard, more available there for us to understand as a company. It's our company. So we want our voices heard.
Appreciate that. Adrian, are you there?
I'm here.
Weigh in on this, because I know you had a couple of conversation points earlier that speak directly to what Pat just said.
So I did, and one of the things I think, Pat, that you talked about was mentorship and your mentorship with May Douglas, and we as an ERG and we as a company believe that mentorship is an important part of employee development. But what happens in many cases is that doesn't always translate to sponsorship when opportunities arise. So can you share with us how you approach sponsorship, and even more importantly, how can an employee seeking a mentor or a sponsor best start that conversation?
I think, well, I'm not an expert on this, Adrian, so this is probably where you probably should get a pro in here talking about mentorship and sponsorship. I'll just talk about it from what I've seen. To me, those are different levels of relationship you have with someone else that you don't have to be somebody you work with. It could be in your family, it could be a friend, but I'll stay inside the business. And then there's formal mentorship and informal mentorship. I encourage people all the time to get in our formal mentorship programs, both as a mentor and a mentee both, because you can pass knowledge on to someone else. I mean, Tamar just mentioned she's been here 21 years. The amount of knowledge she has about how to navigate your way through our company is extremely valuable. And even if you're not an employee here, Tamar, think about people we're trying to recruit and mentor them into our career path to be a Cox employee. I think mentorship is an evolution. You start to build trust. You start to build a knowledge. It's hard for me to sponsor you if I don't know you, if I don't haven't seen you, don't know your strengths. It's hard for me to walk into a room and say, when you're not there, pound on the table for you. I think it helps that relationship form, and it becomes much more natural at that time. You mentioned May Douglas a moment ago and how our relationship formed. And sponsorship's a funny thing, Adrian. I was on an airplane with Jim Robbins. We were flying somewhere. I don't know where we were flying to. And he just looked at me and said, hey, the person who's his chief people officer, actually at that time they were called head of HR, was moving over to Cox Enterprise. He had his opening, he wasn't sure what to do. And I don't know. I just said, have you ever thought about May Douglas? He said, I don't know her. I said, she's incredible. He said, really? I said, Jim, this is where it's not pre-planned. I just said, you go have lunch with her and she'll change your life. And he went and had lunch with her, came back and said, my God, she's incredibly talented. Now, that was a moment of sponsorship. Did I know that at the time? Probably did not know that. May was become the first, she went into the chief people officer role, the role that Karen is in today, Karen Bennett. Funny, 5-6 years later, Jim announces he's retiring, and I get a phone call from Jim Kennedy that says, I'd like you to replace Jim Robbins. I'm pretty certain May had a little bit of telling my story in that room, and I don't know that it wasn't necessarily because I had sponsored her. It's just we knew each other extremely well. But it begins with more fundamental mentoring type relationships where you have a relationship, where you know about someone. I always say the tough part about sponsorship is if I'm sponsoring you, I'm putting my reputation on the line too. And to do that, I need to know enough about you that you understand the accountability or responsibility that goes with that. It's hard to knock on somebody's door and say, will you be my sponsor? What you can do is you can knock on somebody's door and say, hey, can we grab breakfast together? That's how it starts.
Yeah. Great. Hey, Terrence.
Sorry, Adrian. Adrian, did I answer your question?
No, you did, Pat. And I think from my end, just like Tamar, I've been with the company for 21 years, and I've had my share of folks who both been my mentors and also have transitioned to be my sponsors. And it's something that I think we've shared, across all of our ERGs is part of this is building those relationships, networking, because you're only as strong as your network is. So I appreciate your candidness on the answer.
So a funny story, there was a young man that I met years ago when actually he was in high school. And I just checked up on him because he was a friend of my daughter's and he was in college and he was in town. I don't know why, I just reached out to him. And he was a junior, and I said, do you have your internships lined up for junior summer? And he's like, what internships? I said, well, do you want to get hired when you get out of school? And he said, I don't understand. I said, well, you need internships. And he was in the financial area. I said, you aren't going to walk out of school and just get the job you want without internships. So he did the internship. I had nothing to do with this. He got an internship at Cox that summer. He asked how it worked. I explained how to apply, get into it. And he got it all on his own. I waited till the internship ended, and I just grabbed him one day and said, okay, so what'd you learn this summer? And we went through it, and I said, I hope you learned this. You're going to go back to college for your senior year, and you now have a network at Cox. You probably have 8 to 9 people you know personally. I hope you continue to email them and check in with them about how their life is going and share with them how your college experience is going, because May is going to come really fast. And though that network, they may not get you a job at Cox, but they'll probably help you get you a job. And he came out and got a job at Cox, and has done very well. So anyway, my point is network.
That's why we call networking one of the key tenets for us. Get a bunch of diverse individuals in the room, let some conversations begin, and hopefully you can build, whether you catch a job, you build a mentor-mentee relationship, or like you said earlier, you get some level of sponsorship, which is the cherry on top, right? Terrence, let me bring you into this conversation. I know we were talking previously about current events, and I'm pivoting you for a second onto the current event topic. Bring Pat in on that. Let me let you introduce that.
No, absolutely. Charles and Pat, thank you for the opportunity and your leadership. We were discussing a survey. Back in 2019, the Harris poll surveyed about 5,000 employees across the US, the UK, and France for a Glassdoor's diversity and inclusion study. The results uncovered that about 42% of those surveyed felt like they had experienced or witnessed racism in the workplace. That was the year before the social awakening with the murder of George Floyd. And so, Pat, my question is, how do you think employees in the communication industry would respond to the question of have you seen or experienced or witnessed racism in the workplace?
Great question. Terrence, I'm processing with 42% because that means they probably surveyed people of color and Caucasians or white people in that same survey, which means, did you say discrimination? Yeah, I think you did.
They had experienced or witnessed racism in the workplace.
Okay, racism. That means if you're a person of color, that number is scary high, almost probably 80, 90, maybe 100%. But I'll just stay with your question. I would like to think our industry is better than that, but we are a reflection of society. And bias and racism is something that we have to be always on guard on. There is a Dr. Robbins is doing work with us right now, doing I'd probably call it diversity and inclusion training, but he calls it something else. He teaches you how the human mind works. Mm-hmm. And we have to be careful. We are naturally biased. Every one of us is. And we have to be careful. The brain, if you let the brain go and don't use other knowledge, it can do weird things and it can cause behaviors. And I'm not saying everybody understands how racist their behavior is. And sometimes you have to find ways to educate them along the way. Peer-to-peer is one way you educate them along the way, is if you have a trusted relationship, you can explain what you just said, how that hurts, or what you just said, what that means to me, because they may not get it. Then there are people who are just racist because they are mean, and that's different. And that may have to involve the escalation to include your boss. And if that doesn't work, we obviously can escalate to HR. We have a hotline for a reason. I'd like to say we're better, Terrence, but I think I'd be in denial.
Thank you, Pat.
Hey, Terrence, let me stay with you for a second. If you mind, can you cultivate that idea that you talked to me earlier about the vote?
No, absolutely. And thanks, Charles. Pat, we know that Georgia is in the spotlight right now, when it comes to voter registration and massive overhaul that was just done to the laws. What is Cox doing about the new Georgia voting restrictions, if anything?
Okay. Well, first off, I think it's, if you work at Cox, some people on the call probably don't. A pretty fundamental pillar of our company, it goes all the way back to our founder, Governor Cox, is a person's right to vote. In fact, actually, we feel so strongly about it is, if you don't know, you get PTO. If you need time off to go vote, we will pay paid time off so you can go get to the poll and have your voice heard. With the Georgia specific bill, we worked very hand in hand with the most powerful lobby organization we could in Georgia, and that happens to be the chamber. And so we lobbied that bill through the chamber. At this point, we have a bill. It's in the courts. I think we need to let the court challenge work its way through. I think you all know where we are at from a value standpoint. I would also say that don't forget the AJC, owned by the Cox family, has done a really nice job of transparency, of educating the facts about what's in the bill and what's not. And the other thing I would say about the AJC is they've done a nice job of starting to educate that this is not just the state of Georgia. There's other states with bills and activity going on. So I encourage you to read up, look for sources that are factual, be careful not to look for sources that are spinning so you have the facts. I just underscore, these are our rights. And your right to vote is really, really important. And a lot of people have fought, some have lost their lives for their right to vote. So you have a responsibility, whether you want, I don't mean to be so serious here, to understand what's going on. And so my point is read and learn for yourself. Make sure you know the facts.
Thank you. It's a serious topic, sir. Much appreciated, Pat. Thank you.
Not a problem.
And Pat, so we're gonna end this portion with Adrian. We're gonna give you, Adrian, the last question, which I know you were talking about glass ceilings, et cetera, Adrian. So tee it up and let's see what Pat has to think about it.
No, appreciate it, Charles. So yeah, I think, Pat, you made mention of the work that Cox has done to increase and build awareness around increasing the people of color that are represented at the senior leader and C-suite levels and other, actually all levels of the company. What we look at with the Latino ERG is, nationwide, Latinos make up just 4% of executive officer positions at Fortune 500 companies. And that percentage actually flows down the path when you look at the director and manager levels. So my question to you really is, what do you think the greatest challenge is in breaking that glass for Latinos to achieve higher representation at these levels?
I'm going to, I don't mean to turn the table on you here because I am, because I mean, we're no different. 13% of our workforce is Hispanic, but if you go to the more senior levels of leadership, it's 4%. It's funny you would say that. I even looked down, I had the numbers in front of me because I wanted to know that. I tend to always go back and talk about recruitment, development, succession lines, mentoring, all of those things, mentoring circles. What are we missing? What is American business missing, Adrian, that we should be paying more attention to?
Yeah, I think it starts, number one, I would say, Pat, is, making sure that our employee base understands the importance of, completing their education or starting their education if they have not done so, and looking at the benefits that the company that you work for provides. I think as I speak about Cox, we provide a very generous tuition reimbursement. So I think part of the mentality that Latino employees have is we need to be hard workers. We need to work as hard because our work will pay off and actually allow us to move up in the company. But part of it, once you get into the manager, director, and C-suite level, is what are those other check boxes that we haven't checked?
Okay.
I think that's one of the pieces where we need to do a better job of making sure that we're educating our frontline employees, actually, and all of our employees on the fact that there is an importance behind using the benefits like the tuition reimbursement and other benefits like the mentorship programs that we have to create those those opportunities for them to move up.
And I also tell you that anytime you can encourage people, I'll pick on Charles here. When you can encourage someone to take a leadership role. I met Tamar years ago through the diversity committee, I think in Las Vegas, right? Tamar, is that where I first originally met you?
Yes, we're at a regional diversity council meeting.
Yeah. So anytime you do that, it increases your exposure, and it gives you a chance to be seen as a leader. You're functionally respected, but get to be seen as a leader of leaders. And I realize you asked me specifically about the Hispanic community, but for anyone, just encourage them to take on roles, accountabilities. Don't even have to change jobs, but there are opportunities to get exposure, and they help you down the road. We're talking about NAMIC today, and NAMIC's a wonderful organization. I don't know that Joyeva is on this call today, but you asked Joyeva Philpott how fun it was running the board for NAMIC. Her and I talked about it. It was a pain in the rear end. It's difficult. You're dealing with a lot of personalities, a lot of agendas, but it made her a better leader. And it got her exposure across the industry. And all of that helps fill up her backpack and got her ready when an opportunity came along. And Jen Hightower went to CEI. Joyeva was ready to step up. So I give a shout out to NAMIC, but I'm telling you, there are opportunities in the ERGs alone. Just decide that there's leadership roles inside ERGs. There's a mission of each ERG. Know the mission, drive the mission, and it gives you a chance to build out your network. So anyway, you got me kind of a little wound up there. Sorry about that, Charles. Are we out of time? Did I mess up? Sorry.
No, you're good. Actually, I wanted to give you the final word. I don't know if you wanted that to be it or if you wanted to give us your last thoughts, and not necessarily just to Cox, but to the NAMIC membership at large, industry individuals who may be watching as well.
With the NAMIC, it's an incredible organization, and I've been fortunate enough to be involved with NAMIC along the edges, and I've met pretty special executives along the way. So your membership in NAMIC is going to be as strong as you are involved. If you're involved, it will be a very powerful organization in terms of building out your network, helping prepare you for future opportunities. And just there's mentoring inside of a company, and then there's mentoring you can get from outside the company that's pretty powerful. So I encourage your involvement there. And then Charles, I'll wrap up with you, and to Adrian and Terrence and Tamar, thank you for doing this. I realize that this isn't something you just easily do off the side of your desk. Thank you for doing this. And Charles, your leadership and your commitment and your drive to make today happen is appreciated. So thanks for your patience, all of you. I appreciate it. I like the fact you let me be involved, and
thank you.
Keep the dialogue going, guys.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you as well. So there you have it, folks. I mean, just to go briefly back in time, Multi-Channel News had to figure out who would be their first ever executive of the year. And you can see by Pat's reaction the humility that he shows, but we all understand why. These were not easy conversations. These were tough questions in some cases, right? Pat mentioned, involvement. And so shout out to, the Sujatas, the Keiths, the Karen Bennett's, et cetera, who all have embraced NAMIC and jumped in. In fact, Keith had a town hall last week where they had some very tough questions that they answered, and it was an awesome event. And so it's only through activities like these where you have that involvement, where you have that tough, transparent conversations where people can learn and grow. And this Coffee Talk series is all about having great conversations with awesome leaders. And Pat, you did not disappoint. We really appreciate your time, not just for Cox, not just for NAMIC, but for the industry at large. And we thank you.
Have a wonderful day. Thank you, Charles.
Yep. Thank you, Terrence. Thank you, Adrian. Thank you, Tamar. And audience, we appreciate you coming in for our first live taping of Coffee Talk.